Hey, all right, cheap heat time once again. Going to talk about African music. I'm going to try to divide it up by region. I'm going to do a couple of videos actually, because there's a lot of it out there. A lot of it actually surprisingly inexpensive. If you know where to look and how to look and who to look for. What are we listening to now? Ghanaian master drummer Oboe Adi did a great record on a small label from the Pacific Northwest called Avocet Records. Talked about that before. And he's recording here with a bunch of American musicians, mostly top-notch jazz guys and funk guys from the Pacific Northwest. There are some African players on this though. Oboe Adi on hand drums and vocals, and Israel Ano on trap drums, drum set. But a lot of these other guys, Thara Memory on trumpet, Tom Hill, Rich Holly, really great horn section. Rich Holly is a huge jazz name right now, one of the top tenor players in the US. He's all over this, plays a lot of solos. This is from the early 80s, 1983, but there's no BS keyboards on this. It's all really, really great sounding, and you're gonna get to hear pretty much all of side 2, I think. Anyway, Oboe Adi, the album's called, I think this is called Oboe. He did a couple of them. This is the best of the lot. This is simply called Oboe. Anyway, get it. I'm serious. This is so stunningly great. So I'm going to talk about mostly artists from Ghana, Nigeria, the west coast of Africa. Definitely a different vibe elsewhere in Africa. But there's so much to talk about. Of course, the first name that most people think of is Fela. And he always had the big bands, and it's very hard to find Fela records in there. Even the reissues, the contemporary reissues from the 70s and 80s are astronomically expensive. So get the reissues. What the heck? You know, the new ones that they're doing. They might be better sounding. I don't know. I've got all the OGs, so I was interested in this stuff years ago. It's the only advantage of being old, believe me. I'd rather be young. Anyway, Fela had a lot of band members. A lot of them went off and did their own thing. This is a band, you know, I just randomly picked this up. It's called Ghetto Blaster. The record's called People. And it's basically members of his late 70s, early 80s Egypt 80 band that split off and did their own thing. It's really good. I mean, it's as good as, it's not quite as great as Fela Kuti's stuff, but it's right up there, and it's definitely Afrobeat. It's definitely got that thing going on, and it's really cheap. There's numerous pressings of this, Euro and US. I got this for $2. I don't know if you'll find it for that cheap. It's got a gnarly cutout. But the reason why I got this, there's a saxophone player on this named Steve Potts. And Steve Potts, as some of you may know, played with Steve Lacy for years in the avant-garde jazz realm. And I thought, Steve Potts, I'm going to check this out. It's only $2. It's kind of the essence of cheap heat in a way. Oh, check this out. It's $2. It's $1. It's $3. It's $5. Chump change. And you buy it, and it's a great record. This is a really fantastically wonderful record, hard-filed. And I would say get it if you like African music at all, especially if you dig Fela. And you could be the first on your block to get the Ghetto Blaster record. It's on a small US label associated with Celluloid Records, I believe, but it's not on celluloid. Another artist that has been incredibly prolific and has recorded numerous fantastic records that I could talk about for hours is King Sunny Ade. I actually saw him live, and I have to say it's one of the greatest concerts I've ever seen. So if you ever have a chance to see King Sunny Ade and his African beats in any context, go see them. This is the first record I heard by him, called Juju Music. And the thing that flipped me out about this is the use of pedal steel guitar. It's just freaky. And then also there's some really great synthesizer on this. Anyway, this is a fantastic album. I would say this is a classic. It's a must-have for anybody that likes music. And you don't have to like African music to like this. It's just great. It's fantastic. I used to fall asleep to this. It's beautiful, bubbling, polyrhythmic, gorgeous record. And can't say enough good things about it. It's my favorite of all the records he's done. I have a bunch of them, but this is the one that stands out. And the U.S. pressing is very cheap. It's on Mango, which is a subsidiary of Island, and can be had for like $5. And really, any of his stuff is worth checking out. So King Sunny Ade, if you haven't heard his music yet, you really owe it to yourself to check it out. Just long, stretchy, jammy tracks with this bubbling percussion and polyrhythms going every which way and odd instrumentation, but lots of talking drum, which is really cool. Another band from, these guys are actually from all over East Africa and the Caribbean. And a lot of their records are cheap. You have to kind of pick and choose very carefully though. I find some of their stuff a little bit too pop. That's just my taste though. You might really dig all of their stuff. You probably already know about them too. It's Osibisa. And they're from, there's guys in Osibisa from Ghana, Nigeria, I think maybe Ivory Coast, which is called Burkina Faso now, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway, this is their first eponymous record, Osibisa. Came out in the US on Deca. And yeah, it tells you where they're from. Trinidad, Nigeria, Antigua, and mostly from Ghana. So Caribbean and African influences all over the place. It's a great jazzy, funky, early 70s foray into really cool sort of poly-African music, I would say. And really one of my favorites by them. They've done a number of records. These are my three favorites though, and consistently the most jazzy, which is something I look for the most, with instrumentals and horn solos and guitar solos and keyboard solos. Some of their other stuff gets real pop, and just I'm not as crazy about those. These are the ones I've kept. So Woyaya is a really great record. Again, still on Deca. I think this is their third record or their second record. And again, mixture of nationalities represented, mostly Ghanaian dudes, but Wendell Richardson's from the Caribbean. He's a guitarist. He made his solo record, which is super rare and super hard to find. Look it up sometime. Robert Bailey from Trinidad on keyboards. He became a big-time session player in England. Lofty Amao, you're going to hear about him more in a second, from Nigeria. Grenada, Spartacus R on bass. And anyway, just again, sort of a polyglot assemblage of musical traditions on this. But I think in a way that's what makes it so successful and so interesting. Finally, after some personnel changes, Osibisa wound up on Warner Brothers in America. And my favorite record by them from the Warner Brothers years is this one. It's called Happy Children. And it's a jammer, let me tell you folks. It's probably their most jazz-influenced record that I've heard. They've got other records that I've heard that I haven't heard actually. They've got an extensive discography. Anyway, different guys on this, but the core, Teddy Ose, Mac Tonto, and Saul Amarfio, and Kofi Avior. Those are the core guys. They're still together on this one. And yeah, this is just a wonderful record. It's called Happy Children on Warner Brothers. And I got this copy it was definitely less than $10. And I think it might have been less than $5. And beautiful, sharp, not played out, good shape. So Osibisa, check them out if you haven't already. More of an Afro-funk sort of feeling, not the Fela kind of long stretched out tracks, but more of a the British influence is definitely creeping in there. Speaking of the British influence, Steve Winwood recorded a record with a couple of African musicians, Abdul Sisi Amao and Remy Kabaka. And it's just a trio. Steve Winwood plays guitars, bass, and keyboards. Kabaka is the drummer, and Amao is the percussionist. And I think he plays some saxophones on this. Anyway, this is an amazingly great record. It came out in numerous pressings. It started out on Island and wound up on the Antilles label. This is one of the Antilles pressings. This is the import Antilles pressing. There was a US Antilles pressing as well with a different cover. And then there's the OG, which is gatefold and has different cover on it. So there's numerous pressings of this, i.e. Kita. Anyway, all instrumental, very long tracks, just 5 tracks, 2 on one side, 3 on the other. And it's fantastic. You've really got to check this out. If you're into jazz rock at all, definitely some funky jazz rock with heavy, heavy, heavy African influence going on here. All instrumental. Superb record. I've had this since I was a kid, literally. So some of these records are led by African musicians, but recorded mostly with British people or American people backing them up. To me, that's okay. It still qualifies as African music if it's got that sound. And Chili Charles was a pretty well-known session musician in the UK in the late 70s. He recorded 2 records for Virgin. This one, Busy Corner, it's got most of the guys from the Olympic Runners on it. If you don't know the Olympic Runners, they're a British funk band that was great. I'll talk about them in a separate video entirely. Anyway, this is a record that Chili Charles recorded with both the Olympic Runners, plus some other guys. Mel Collins from Camel and King Crimson is on this. Who else? Del Richardson from Osibisa plays guitar. Boz Burrell is on some tracks as the bassist. So this is sort of an all-star British record, but Chili Charles, I believe, was an African transplant and lived in England for many years, or maybe he was from the Caribbean, I don't know, but it's really got an African feel to it. This is his second record, Quick Step. Also really great, all instrumental, kind of funky jazz or jazzy funk. I like both of these records. I've kind of been on the fence about them at different times. I think I sold these and then re-brought the same copies back. So that says something. Gene Roussel is on this, who's another big-time UK session dude. Anyway, really great 70s jazz funk with African influences, and I think there's sufficient Africanness on those to put them in with these records, and they're cheap, really cheap. The last record I'm going to talk about, and I'm not quite sure where this guy's from originally. He just goes by Mustafa, and he did this record. It almost qualifies as a private issue, and it's just simply called Afrock. And Mustafa is a vocalist, percussionist, guitarist. He plays some balafone on this. And as a singer, he's not that great. He's kind of got that sort of choked vocal sound, like he's choking on something. But there's a lot of instrumental stuff on this record, and it's really great. I've never heard of any of the musicians on this record except for one guy. The bassist is Greg Lee, who was with Caldera. So I kind of got this record on the strength of Greg Lee being on it, and just pure curiosity, and also it was cheap. Anyway, it's a really cool kind of fusion record, jazz rock fusion. Some of it gets a little commercial, but it's not real slick, actually. I like it a lot. Not everybody I've talked to likes this record or considers it a great discovery, but I really dig it. Anyway, it's all originals. Carlos de La Paz plays guitar and guitar synthesizer on it. Steve Campos on pianos and synthesizers. Victor Bassetti on drums. Don Moores played marimba and balafone. Bill Bergman plays sax on one track. I think he's like an LA session guy. And there's a female vocalist on this too, Layla Thigpen, who's actually quite good. So check this out if you have a chance. Probably you'll have to source it on Discogs, but it's worth checking out if you like jazz rock and funky music. Anyway, so that's a small selection of West African and UK African and Caribbean African music that's cheap. There's more out there, I'm sure, but a lot of it's not cheap anymore, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm going to do a separate video on South African music, which is completely different, but worth your time and worth checking out. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, playing is Oboe Adi, and check him out, and thanks for watching.